Hi, so this is kind of, I guess, my first bit of research for my PhD, and I worked with Jude, so she's helped as part of this. But basically, we developed a new measure for trichotillomania, and it has just been published as well, so you can actually see this in print. Um, so the key messages I want you to take home from today is that traditional assessment measures have their limitations, but using our new approach can address some of these limitations, and that ultimately, we call it SAM squared. SAM squared can capture the large individual differences and large situational effects, and also situation by individual interactions. Um, when we think about measuring trichotillomania, we can describe the current measures as unsituated in nature. And what I mean by this is you take, for example, a question on the Massachusetts General Hospital hair pulling scale. For example, on an average day, how often did you feel the urge to pull your hair? You as an individual have to sort of try average in your own head how much you pull your hair, and that's really, really hard to do. As humans, it's really hard to actually create an average for that and answer that question. There are a lot of biases that come in. There's like the availability heuristic. So if you just had a really strong urge to pull your hair, when you answer that question, you might actually rate your urges higher for that week than maybe they have been. And also, we have a kind of innate feelings about who we are as a person, and that can kind of affect how we answer this question. So again, it also they ignore situation effects. If someone asks how introverted or extroverted you are, you might be really extroverted when you're having dinner with your friends, but when you're in a work meeting, you might be quite introverted. So how do you answer that question? And then also there's the kind of situation by individual effect, such that in the same situation, the same individual doesn't behave the same way. We're not all extroverted when we're with our friends, but we're not all introverted in work meetings. So there's a lot going on that kind of general questionnaires sort of ignore. Um, so then to our situated assessment method, SAM squared. So this is kind of done in with my supervisor. He's done it on a little different domains like healthy eating, stress, social connectedness, social support, and I wanted to apply it to trichotillomania. So the way we address this is we kind of look at it in two dimensions of situational experience and the situated action cycle. So we kind of aim to measure the behavior of interest in different situations where that behavior might occur, and also kind of using different things that might influence that behavior. And you can basically use this for many different constructs, but obviously for this talk, I'm talking about trichotillomania. So we developed the SAM2 TAI, so trichotillomania assessment instrument. First, we had to kind of get situational experience, and we initially turned to the literature, but there wasn't really anything on when and where people pull their hair. I think I found one study when I did this that had 10 items. So my first study actually kind of asked people who pull their hair where they pull their hair and where don't they pull their hair. And I think I generated about 300 unique pulling situations and about 280 unique non-pulling situations. There was a lot of overlap. Obviously, for our measure, we couldn't use all 300. We sampled 52, and these were our pulling situations. There's about 30 of them. But also, what's interesting to note is that for some people, these were non-pulling situations. So, like that top one here, watching TV, some people actually would never pull their hair when watching TV, but it was the most common one where people would pull their hair. And then again, we sampled some non-pulling situations. Though again, if you look at it, there are ones that people would pull their hair in and people wouldn't pull their hair in. So some people would pull their hair while cleaning the house, but most people wouldn't. So again, just highlighting the huge variability in when and where people will pull their hair. So once we had our sample, we could then move on to kind of the situated action cycle and what questions we would ask people in these situations. So there's two different studies, so I know it looks a bit confusing. It's explained a lot clearer in the paper, but I only have 8 minutes. But basically, frequency and urge were the kind of the first things we looked at as our dependent variables, and then we had our independent variables. In my first study, we had like 13, I think, and in the second one we had 10 because it was too much for people to answer. And these were based on 3 models of hair pulling, so the comprehensive behavioral model, the emotion regulation model, and the model of cognitions and beliefs. And kind of we tried to pull as much as we could to cover all the different possibilities for what might make you more likely to pull your hair in a situation or another. And we did 2 studies. One had 117 people and one had 99 people who self-identified as having trichotillomania. This is kind of what it looked like for participants. So you might have the question, how frequently do you pull in this situation? And then you'd have the 52 situations, and these were all randomized, and you kind of had to rate and kind of see which ones you're more likely to pull in or not. And again, only going to highlight 2 of the findings just because of time. So the first one is, as I'm sure you're all probably aware, large individual differences. So study 1's on that side, and then that's study 2 with less people. But basically, each dot here is a person. So this is their average across the 52 situations. So we're kind of ignoring situations here, and we're just looking at each person. And you can just see the huge range in urges, in frequency, kind of going from 0 to 10, basically using the whole scale. But all our different kind of predictors are different for the people. So we've kind of got situational control is big for some people, it's not so big for others. Internal control is really important. For some, it's all about the cues, so that's the triggers in the environment. But for some, that's really not relevant. So this is just kind of really to highlight how the experience is completely different for everyone. And then this is kind of our biggest finding is our situational variance and our situation by individual interaction. So this is our really cool figure. But basically, each row is a person. So each row is one of the participants in the study, and each column is one of the situations. So from here, we can initially see that no rows are the same. So no 2 people have an exact same profile for pulling, but also no 2 situations are the same. So if you look at each column, each situation is different. There are some situations which are less likely to pull. So blue is 0 for frequency. So you would never pull. If it's as blue as it can be, never pull. If it's as red as it can be, you always pull in that situation. And then kind of white is sometimes do, sometimes don't. So that's kind of our spectrum. And you can see that there are some situations where you would never pull your hair, and that kind of are common across people, but you still have like that little band in the middle where most people are blue, there's a bunch of people that are really, really red. So it's just not the same. You can't say that this situation is a situation where no one would pull their hair in. It is very unique and very individual. And then, as I said, each then row is a person, and you can also then see that basically that's that person's pulling profile. So there are some people that are kind of red almost in every situation. So they're constantly pulling in most situations in their life. There are some people that are very blue, and there are just a couple of situations where they'd really strongly pull their hair. So they might be easier to target potentially in treatments. So it's kind of just highlighting the huge variability, and our measure is able to pick this up and kind of apply this to kind of different situations. And yeah, that was kind of our key take home, is that the traditional assessment measure has limitations. It's really hard as humans to average our experience and answer a question in an accurate manner. So if we want to actually treat trich, we need to be able to measure it accurately and know what's really going on in that person's life. So using our situated approach can address this. It is able to capture those large individual differences, the large situational effects, and the situation by individual interaction.